tēnā tātou tuatahi kia koe o te puka, nau tātou ko I whakatau, huri no kia tātou katoa, tēnei te mihi atu. Kia koe I kahu, no ki te honori, ki te tui muhi a koutou I tēnei pō. I raro I te reo karanga o te hui nei, nā reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Can I just add to the greetings that Uncle Puka provided this afternoon and welcome you to the college. It is a privilege to have you with us, not just tonight but also over the weekend, and to acknowledge also the importance of the work that you are doing. I just want to put a clarifier on, I don't work in this area of research. I know it is a significant area and kaupapa for us all, so really looking forward to the outcome. But as someone who is interested in and does work in the context of iwi development, I think this is a significant issue for all of us, particularly as we're looking at how we protect and preserve our future generations and allow them to grow up healthy and well connected to us and who they are as people. So for that, I would also like to acknowledge kahu, because often in this context, when you're asked to, firstly it was, well, we're having this hui here, I was like, ka pai, that's awesome. And then it was, and you're going to speak. Ka pai, not so awesome. But it was more around, you know, what could I contribute in terms of the discussion around the kaupapa of the hui, which is why I kind of put the disclaimer at the front. So what I'm really focusing on tonight is health and well-being from an iwi perspective, and it's really more around looking at some of our history and I guess in the context of historical trauma, in the context of how we not necessarily have resolved it, but how do we become resilient in the face of colonisation, and then move forward as a people. So I'm not at all pretending that I have the answers, but more just providing a context or a perspective for you this evening, and hopefully just to provide some thoughts for you to ponder over the course of the weekend. So the way that I'm attempting to look at it, might help if I turn this on, is in terms of markers, so markers of resistance, markers of the consequences of resistance, and in our case that's of raupatu, our markers of resilience, and some reflections about where we have come to. So this year we are commemorating, and some people talk about it as celebrating. I'm not necessarily sure that that's the right word, but we are commemorating the 20th year since the signing of our settlement of raupatu, and so I have some reflections around where we have come to as a people and perhaps where we might go to. So let me start with resistance. So King Ipōtato, the first Māori king, was appointed as the king and the head of the Kingitanga movement in 1858. And contemporary times we often confuse the notion of a king movement with a monarchy, but actually it was a political movement, and it was a movement that was established in the face of the onslaught of colonisation. So in respect, in the 1850s, it was a resistance movement. There were three key tenets to the Kingitanga movement, and that was around stopping intertribal warfare, around bringing tribal unity through that, bringing our tribes together to work together, to be more collective in our ways in which we were approaching colonisation. And thirdly, it was about trying to find a better way of managing the whole process of colonisation, and largely that was through stopping the sale of the ongoing sale, legal or otherwise, of our land and the loss of our land. So King Ipōtato, across those tribes who were participating in the kōrero at that time, was deemed to be, I guess, of sufficient status to be able to carry the mantle of the King movement. The King movement was named as such quite deliberately, and it was really rangatira ki te rangatira. So at the time, with Queen Victoria, the idea was that we would have a chiefly voice at the same level to be able to have the communications with the rangatira of the British colony at the time. So it was really about elevating, not to be able to have be relegated in terms of the colonial government, but to elevate it to make sure that our needs, our aspirations, and really our rights could be discussed and presented at the appropriate forum. So I call it resistance because it was really about how we could systematically resist the way in which colonisation sought to take over us. And I'm not really going to rehash that history because it's well known to all of us. But Kotahi Te Kōhao Te Ngira, which is one of the founding tongi of this college, speaks to the need for all of us to come together, about coming together for a common purpose, coming together really to make sure that we are able to move forward as a people. But often we forget, so often we talk about Kotahi Te Kōhao Te Ngira, so through the eye of the needle, the red, black and white threads must pass, and generally that's where the tongi finishes. But if we look at the second part of it, I muri kia mau ki te aroha, ki te ture, me te whakapono, I think it's those values that really resonate and bring to life the first part of that tongi. Because without those values, then we are empty and we have nothing to hold on. So for me, in terms of thinking about this as a marker of our initial resistance, it's connected to the key principles that make us unique as a people and give us hope in the face of that notion of colonisation. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a history trip back in time and talk about the impact that that resistance or that resistance movement had on us, particularly as a tribe. So, as one can imagine, establishing a movement like the Kingitanga did not sit well with the colonial government, to the point that because Waikato is seen as very fertile and was so at that point in time, and under the King movement, all sale or all handover or whatever you like to call it of Waikato tribal lands was ceased and forbidden. So the colonial government saw that as being an act of rebellion. They passed legislation to that effect, and the Suppression of Rebellion Act enabled them to come across Rangatawhiri through down the Bombay Hills and legally confiscate over 1.2 million acres of our lands, which we call the Raupatu. So the significance of this is that Waikato as a tribe, which was traditionally prior to Raupatu seen as being economically wealthy, culturally wealthy, able to look after its resources, its people, and to be able to host people, lost all of that. And they became a landless people and a destitute people. So that was really our first experience, like a direct experience, if you like, of what the government could do through passing a piece of legislation and noting that the pen, I guess the experience of the pen being mightier than the sword. So during this period also we saw the loss of our first king, King Pōtato, and it was during this time of the confiscation of Raupatu that his son, King Tāwhiao, ascended and became the second Māori king. So Tāwhiao was given the challenge, if you like, very early in his kingship of one, having suffered the indignity of having the Raupatu of 1.2 million acres of lands stolen, or illegally confiscated, and then trying to figure out a way in which he could bring together his people who were landless and just continue to seek some resolution or restitution of what had happened. So I guess this is where for me quickly we move to what I call the first marker of resilience. Tāwhiao was known, and is still known across the tribe, as being a visionary. And I think many of his tongi, again, which we use not just here in the college but across the tribe and indeed across the motu, really are what I call the first markers of resilience and of hope for us as a people. He was determined that the kaupapa of Raupatu would not die, just as he was determined that we as a people would not die, that regardless of what the Crown had done to us, we would prevail. So in his understanding of the mantle and the rangatira status of the King movement, in the 1880s he went to England and sought an audience with Queen Victoria. So again, this notion of rangatira ki te rangatira. And the simple purpose was that he could go and talk to her about the kaupapa here of Raupatu. He was denied an audience and was told quite clearly that this wasn't the place, England wasn't the place for him to discuss a colonial matter, and he was told to return. We've actually heard, well not heard, but through some of the papers, that it was the Queen's officials that were really nervous about him going to England, and they advised her, but she was quite keen to meet with him, and they advised her strongly not to, because they were scared about the consequences of what might happen. So as a result, he returned home, and he said quite simply, "I haere mai atu, I hoki mai mai." So he didn't feel that he lost any face at all, but that he had an opportunity to really present at a global level the issues of what we were facing here at home. So the idea about coming back home and seeking resolution back home was taken up by his son, King Mahuta, the third Māori king. So he took leave from the kingship for a period of time when he entered into Parliament and was a member of the Legislative Council. And again, he also sought the resolution of Raupatu, or sought to raise it within the confines of Parliament. Like his father, he was unsuccessful, but I think you start to see a picture of generational indicators of resilience, that this kaupapa was significant enough for them as our leaders not to die. Again, his son, now in the fourth generation of the King movement, King Te Rata, returned, followed in the footsteps of his grandfather, King Tāwhia, and returned to England and tried to seek an audience with King George. Again, he was denied, but again, the kaupapa of Raupatu was carried through the generations. So for us as a contemporary generation, we start to, and we think about, well, things aren't happening enough. They're not happening fast enough. They're not happening quickly enough. And if we look back and start to trace some of the footsteps of our tribal leaders, and we see that, resilience does take time, but also that the kaupapa is significant enough that it will be resolved even if it takes generations. During the 1920s, we see some quite significant change and shifts. There was a Royal Commission here, the Sim Commission, and there were growing concerns about the illegality, if you like, of the whole process of confiscation of lands and the colonisation, not just here but internationally as well. So following Te Rata's journey to England, there were within the local political movements, I wouldn't say a great desire, but some desire to begin some discussions. And they were largely led by tribal leaders, Tūmate Mahuta and Pei Tiakiwai Jones. And really what they were doing was going backwards and forwards to Wellington, trying to rally the support of key leaders within Parliament, and again always pushing this kaupapa of the Raupatu and the resolution of it. What we talk about is, I guess, our first key success, for want of a better word, or a shift and a significant milestone for the tribe in the partial settlement under the Waikato-Tainui Land Claim Settlement Act of 1946. So Te Puia herself was very instrumental, alongside Pei and Tūmate, in negotiating with Prime Minister Fraser at the time and what we saw there was the establishment of the Tainui Māori Trust Board. So, in their words and in their thoughts and in their minds, it wasn't a full and final settlement, as we're often talked about today, but it was really a platform to establish, or to be able to provide the tribe some foothold in terms of moving forward as a people. By that stage, national legislation around the Suppression of Tohunga Act, around our language, really we were not just destitute as a tribe, but we were destitute as a people, in terms of our culture, in terms of our access to natural resources, in terms of our ability just to be who we are, not just as Māori, but also as tribal peoples. So in their eyes, te puia, pei te hurinui, tū mate mā, it was an opportunity to re-establish a sense of mana and a sense of pride in ourselves as a people. It didn't mean that the kaupapa of Raupatu went away, however. What we also see is that during Te Puia's time, another generation of the King movement with King Koroki. And so significant change again in the 5th generation of the King, since the establishment of the King movement. Some continued markers of resilience, but also continued markers of, as demonstrated in terms of their leadership. In 1966, Tiakiwai was a successor to her father and became the first female leader of the King movement. But again, she continued to carry that mantle of seeking resolution for the Raupatu. I guess another milestone and a significant one for us, since following the settlement of the Waikato-Tainui claim in 1946, was the return of Taupiri Maunga in 1975. So for many of you who aren't aware, that is our sacred mountain. Many of our people, our ancestors, our kings, our queen are buried there. And it was actually a political negotiation. At the time, the Waitangi Tribunal and the establishment of it was being discussed, and so tribal leaders at the time were able to negotiate their support for the establishment of the tribunal in exchange for the return of our maunga. So again, I think having carried that mantle again through the 6th generation, for us it was a really significant moment to have the return of our maunga. As many of us know, key indicators for us of our health and well-being aren't just us as a people, but it's who we connect to, and having connections to our ancestors was significant and continues to be significant for us. Moving forward to 1995, the Raupatu settlement in the time of Te Tiakiwai was both at the time celebrated and was not celebrated. It was a very contentious decision. Many of our tribal members did not support the signing of the settlement. But tribal leaders at the time, and Te Tiakiwai herself, were really clear that similar in the footsteps and the work that Te Puia and earlier generations had done, this was not a full and final settlement. But this was, again, another opportunity for the tribe to take a step forward and start to create its own markers of resilience and reclamation. So the words of King Tāwhiao, I riro whenua atu me hoki whenua mai, ko te moni hei utu mo te hara, were really reminders for this generation in the 1990s about how successive generations of leaders and successive generations of our ancestors have fought for this resolution of this kaupapa of Raupatu. At the time, and even now 20 years later, a lot of people focus on the 170 million and the cash that was returned. Not really focusing too much on the very small parcel of land that was returned. We are fortunate here at the college that we were directly written into the legislation, and we were built because of this legislation and the Raupatu settlement. And we have a specific purpose, which I'll come to. But one of the things that we often tend to forget, and which I do want to highlight, over the weekend, encourage you to have a look just on the wall opposite me, is a picture of Tiakiwai with Queen Elizabeth II. And I think a few years ago, when Queen Elizabeth went on her first visit to Northern Ireland, there was some discussion, and I think a question was posed to her whether she would apologise to the Irish people around the English invasion, and the response was that the Queen does not apologise. Well, let me tell you, she does. It is her signature on the piece of legislation, and on that piece of legislation, and what is framed there is the apology. And that really, for what I understand, for our old people and for us really was the most significant component of that Raupatu settlement. Because what it did was it took away all of those generations and was an opportunity for us as a tribe to reclaim our history and to ensure that future generations would not remember their tupuna as rebels, but would remember them as the proud and humble people they were, who were staunch to the kaupapa of seeking that resolution of Raupatu. So I do encourage you over the weekend to have a look at that. So for me personally, yes, we have benefited in terms of this beautiful building that we are in, but also it creates for us physically and I guess a moral obligation that we have an obligation to preserve the history of Raupatu. That is one of the core tenets of the work that we do here at the college. And so for me, that significant component is the apology. Many of our young people, actually not even our young people, but many of us tend to gloss over the fact that we do have an apology, the gloss over the fact of how significant it was. And in speaking to some of the team who were responsible for negotiating what is written, even the debates that were had over certain words and what the Crown would and would not accept. And I think that's a really important story in terms of our own resilience as a people. That we were not just about fighting for the return of confiscated lands, we were also fighting for the return of our mana, but also for the return of our understanding of who we were as a people prior to Raupatu. And so when I hear and had the privilege of listening to the stories of some of those who were responsible for drafting the words contained in the apology, I reflect back to the sacrifices that successive generations before us made so that we are able to stand in this beautiful building today. So the Raupatu settlement was not a full and final. There was much that was left out of the settlement, and one of those was the Waikato River settlement. And in 2008, under the watchful eye of Kingi Tuheitia, our co-negotiators, Lady Raiha Mahuta and Tukuruerangi Morgan, achieved a settlement in respect to our tupuna awa, Te Awa Waikato. And again, harking back to previous generations, these are kaupapa that have been long held in and amongst the tribe. So at the time of the Raupatu settlement, which we often refer to as the land settlement in 1995, the government would not agree around the notion of water ownership. The government still doesn't agree around the notion of water ownership. But at the time, it was really, well, it isn't for you or for us to say who owns the water. Because actually, Ko Te Awa or Waikato is her own self. And so it is not even for us to prove who owns her. We know that we belong to her and that she belongs to us. No tātou te awa, no te awa tātou. So really the words there of Sir Robert Tikotari Mahuta are around it, reminding us of our responsibilities for our future generations to preserve and protect our tupuna awa, Te Awa Waikato. So I put these here not just as a history lesson, but also to think about, for us, about how those significant landmarks, Taupiri Maunga, the land settlement, Te Awa Waikato, how we are intrinsically connected to them. And so for us, they have always been markers of resilience. And we have been, I think, from a tribal perspective, blessed and really fortunate that we have had successive generations of the leaders of the King movement understand the significance of that and have carried that through the generations for our benefit in today's contemporary times. So I'm thinking about our history and where we've come to today. I guess the reflections, as I note, is the significance of kingitanga. So we know over the last few years there's been a lot of commentary around the relevance of kingitanga and around its current status or its structure. And often within Waikato-Tainui we are challenged about whether it's appropriate for us to even talk about these sorts of structures. When Tiakiwai opened our college here in 2000, she talked about this as being a place of open inquiry. And so for us, we take that really seriously, because if we are to be a place of open inquiry, then we have to enable those spaces for challenges to occur. And those challenges occur at all levels. And so some of the serious kaupapa, some of the more light-hearted kaupapa, but some of those kaupapa that run right through to the heart of who we are should find a safe space to be debated here at the college, to be discussed here at the college. Not just discussed and debated, but to find ways in which we can move forward as a people positively in our development. And so thinking about the kaupapa in which we're all convened here for over the weekend, it is no different. It is for us to not be afraid to tackle the hard issues and say the things that often many of us are too scared to say. And that, I think, is really one of the key reflections if I look back, that our tupuna left for us and that our kings and our queen left for us. It is about carrying that mantle and that responsibility, always remembering where we have come from, so that historical legacy becomes important. But noting also that, I guess in a more broad, an Indigenous context, this notion of we are the seventh generation. So more recently we are hearing things about intergenerational investment and commercial development, which is intergenerational and it's looking forward to the future generations. And so for us it's like, well, yeah, that's fine, but we can't just throw these terms around flippantly. And so, over the past couple of months, we've heard this notion here around the seventh generation, and I am slightly uncomfortable with what that looks like and what that means for us. And partly for me, it's more about that, yes, we have an alignment to our whanaunga from the Te Moana Tiakiwai and from further afield. But is it right for us as Indigenous peoples to take other Indigenous peoples' terms, ideas and whakaaro if we don't truly understand the context in which they generated, in which they were established, in which they were born, and apply them because they sound sexy in today's terms? So for me, it's really about understanding our markers of resilience, first and foremost. Often we are told, in order for you to know where you're going, you have to know where you've come from. And for us, it's about remembering that we come from a proud and long line of our own leaders, and we have to know that first before we can stand proud, or stand firstly before we can stand proud and speak to our future generations. But our people, our uri whakatupu, our future legacy are really our children. And what we've tried to do here in the tribe is look at ways in which, through our own tribal development strategies, ways in which we can provide some signposts, if you like, for the future. So we have Whakatupuranga 2050, which is really our key blueprint document. And essentially it talks about a successful, a healthy and prosperous Waikato-Tainui tribal member is one who is connected to kingitanga, who is connected to marae, who is well versed in their reo, well versed in their tikanga and their culture. and is financially secure, is educationally literate, and is able to stand proud as a tribal member, both on the marae, from the marae to the world stage. So from this blueprint structure, we have our governing body, Te Kauhanga, and our tribal organisation group, which is Waikato-Tainui, of which we are a part. So we have our commercial arm, Tainui Group Holdings. We have our Lands Trust, which was born out of the Raupatu settlement, and our River Trust, which was born out of the River settlement, and the college, which actually was born out of both the land settlement in 1995 and given a gift through the 2008 River settlement in terms of the work that we do here. So we are the college, but we are structures and buildings, we are not people. And what becomes significant is how we give life to our people and the work that we do really to be able to contribute to their development. So if we think about those markers and what Pōtatau, Tāwhiao, Mahuta, Te Rata, Koroki, Te Atai Rangikahu, and now Tuheitia, their legacy and Tuheitia's, I guess, responsibility is how we can continue to develop our own markers that are rooted in our history and grounded in our history, so we can never be disconnected again from our history. That is connected to our lands, connected to our awa, connected to our moana, but also connected to our people, connected to our traditions, so who we are as a people and what it is that we do, ensuring that our paipai are strong, ensuring that our cultural traditions are kept alive, but also acknowledging that we are a contemporary people, that we don't just sit in the past, but how we shift and move and face the future is probably the biggest challenge of us all. So I started with markers, and I will finish with one final marker, and that's our markers of hope. And I choose this image deliberately because it's during the, it was taken a couple of years ago at the Koroneihana celebrations, and it was actually during the celebrations of the 150th anniversary of Kingitanga. And so what our tamariki are doing there is actually a quiz around how much do they know about their own history. And so for me it symbolises really both where we have come from and an opportunity for us to educate ourselves, educate our babies, educate our rangatahi, but also to be able to provide a strong and solid platform for them and their future. One of our nanas who was really integral in the building and establishment of this college often talked about the Raupatu, and she said, you know, I will not see the benefit of the benefits from the Raupatu in my lifetime, and paiana tira. But what I would hope is that my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, and the generations that follow will see the sacrifices that the generations who have come before us have made. And I think that's really an important marker of hope for us all, that while we might think we are struggling, yes, we have to struggle with our day-to-day, yes, we have to resolve and try and seek solutions for the issues that are facing us, but we must also consider what our markers of hope are and who we are doing this for. And so for me, and for us here at the college, they are our future, and you know, one day I hope that some of those little kids in there will be standing here, and I will be a kahu saying you will do this and you will do that, or that I could actually be sitting where my nanas are, keeping a watchful eye and muttering if I slip up. But for me, I think the beauty and the privilege of being able to work in a tribal environment like this is that we have our kiko mātuas alongside of us to support us, to provide guidance and advice. That we have our leaders, Sir Robert lying just out here, and also our tupuna out on Taupiri. We have our awa that flows alongside of us, and we are surrounded within and on our own tribal lands. The legacy that I hope that we could leave for our future is much more than what we have today. So to be able to build on that is the challenge that we face, And I would hope that in the generations to come, they might be able to reflect on what we have achieved, and hopefully we haven't done too bad a job. So in closing, again, it's really just to again welcome you and wish you a good 2 days of open discussion around this important kaupapa, around hopefully not so much seeking solutions or resolution, but about finding some of our own markers of hope and what they might look like, and how we might continue to move forward. Be they small steps, they are still nevertheless significant. Nā reira, I raro I tira, tēnei anō te mihi kia tātou katoa hui hui mai nei tēnei pō, tēnā tātou, kia ora mai tātou.
Anoi a te, aroha o, te tumaki, te ao, mai anata, ngā tamai, kai whaka